August 1922. Was she happy? That was what Milo had been asked by May Rutherford 3 days ago. Milo has said so. In fact, when she had said so, she had been counting her blessings, as Ernest had taught her: security, safety, a fulfilling career. Had she any right to feel the way she did? But another fact was that she did. A dark, black feeling, like a hole in her stomach, would not shift, no matter how she had tried to feel better about things. Milo knew what had caused it. It had begun, properly begun, when she had returned with Thomas to Downton Abbey, at the Whitsun weekend. That had been nearly 3 months ago. It had just been the last few weeks that Milo had noticed Mrs. Rutherford seemed different. So when she had asked Milo how she felt, Milo realized the woman must have been worried about her, which made the dark feeling even worse. And, Milo thought, what if she hadn't come back when Thomas had asked her? If she had not gone back, she would have been in ignorance. She would never have known all about the clause in the lease, the anomaly. How was it even fair? Milo looked down at the letter in her hand. Another was in her pocket, and she pushed the first one in with it. The postman had come to the laboratory to give the letter to Milo, rather than Fenland Road. As she stood, now, in the evening outside the platform just beyond York, the train she had come on passed her, onwards, to Scotland, Edinburgh. It had brought her from Cambridge, in the hot immediacy of desire to flee to Downton, to beg, to plead forgiveness for her behavior last time. If only she could be told where the lease was, at least. She hadn't come immediately. Milo had left, and gone to Lipton's, and waited, thinking, looking at her letters until the tea shop closed, whereupon she made to where Blackett had mentioned the club would be that night, and had found Otto Friss, rather than Blackett, coming in by another entrance, a man whom Milo did not know well. Frisch had found her, in fact, and they had nestled amongst dormant university furniture, and he had asked her the problem. Milo had not said much, and the man had sympathized. He was a thin, small man, and had an accent from Eastern Europe. But he spoke English well, and fluently. He was likable, and through Friss, Milo had managed to work out that there were more than one problem. But he hadn't pressed her, and had walked her back to the Rutherfords' home, and Milo said goodbye and waited for him to walk away, before turning and beginning to tramp the streets of Cambridge, making her mind filter out an answer. The lease was one problem. The second, as detailed by a Mr. Hamborough of York, was his question of where he should send the money. Money, Milo had thought. What money? She had read his letter a second time and, because she couldn't quite believe it, a third time. How dare they do that, the Sparks? Milo supposed they thought the house was, in fact, theirs now, though the requisite time had not passed. Requisite time? Had she only known that there was, in law, a clause that gave the tenants life occupancy should they wish it, if the owner had not objected? Well, no one had asked Milo if she objected, and she hadn't found that out until a few days before. If he had not stolen the lease, taken it out of Matthew Crawley's possessions, deprived her of it by fair means, or, well, it was foul means, there was nothing fair about it, then Milo would have known many months before. Matthew Crawley was supposed to have given her the lease agreement, but he never had. After he died, it was found and passed on, and had ended up in the hands of Mary Crawley, in a box of documents sent to her. Of course, there were bigger concerns for Lord Grantham and his family: cost of death duties, loss of land, or estate, or title, or all of these. But this, to her, was as important, and having not known all about these in the first place, she was kept ignorant. So events just happened, out of her control. Well, almost out of her control. At least she had some days. Not much. Milo's mind swarmed with indignation as she tramped the miles between York and Downton. It would take several hours. At least the night was drawing in. Milo liked walking in the dark, unknown to the Rutherfords. She would often let herself out of their home, a mile or two away from the Cavendish building, and walk the lanes while she thought. It was, on reflection, no wonder that the professor had forbidden her things which seemed quite all right: walking 30 miles in the dark, mainly across fields and along tracks. It made her feel better. And then there was the third thing, Don't think about that, now. Think that you are off to sort out your home, put on record your displeasure at your own things being sold off without your knowledge or consent. Think that you will see your grandmother and your aunts and Jack Prue. Ensure everyone sees that you have taken down the transmitter at Street Michael's. It was something she had overlooked, and by overlooking it, Milo found that many people had reminded her about taking it down, to the point that she had left the last time and deliberately not done that. Downton. At least that was something she could do right. But that wasn't all of it. Milo knew how women got to be in the state that she was in. The plumbing of the thing. But he, who came across as caring, interested in helping her, for once. Milo had to have it destroyed at all costs. She knew. Too many people had invested too much into her for her to let them down. And yet, for all that, she had not invited him into Mrs. Crawley's home that night. He had turned up, instead, to berate her about her attitude at the Abbey, about Mary and her trying to locate the lease document. She had already left because of Thomas, and his attitude towards her. Thomas. He had never spoken to her like that before. Ever. Milo wiped tears away with her hand as the darkness fell. It was not an exaggeration to say that the man she looked up so very much to had hurt her a lot with his words. Milo shuddered, feeling tired, and cold and hungry. A copse was dry enough in this weather, and in the morning, when she passed a farmhouse, she could offer money for some food, some milk, a bite of whatever the farmer's wife had made that day. It was harvest, so good food, in abundance and varieties, was being added to larders the country over. Of course the transmitter was Juggalilmo's. Of course she should have taken it down months ago. Her mind drummed away at her, reminding her of her shortcomings. She remembered how everything had seemed so well. Jack Prue had come, with her grandmother and her two aunts, Helen and Isabella. Things can't be as bad as all that, Branson, for the man had been Tom Branson, had said, as he sat next to her in Mrs. Crawley's house. Why don't you tell me about it? He had been nice and affable. He had been friendly. He had made Milo trust him. And so she had told Tom Branson. Why do people tell blatant lies? The lie, in this case being, it's all right if you tell the truth. Milo kicked a stone in her way as the sun to her left began to redden. What it really meant, in her opinion, was, I am a more powerful person than you. Confess your misdemeanor and I will have even more power over you. The future is of my choosing. And so Tom Branson had. He gained more power over Milo. And he used it to shout and be angry. He used it to tear at her dress, no longer Sybil ''s. It had become ribbons, after he had torn at it, unsuitable for anyone to wear now. When he had finished, he had told her he had the lease, that he had always had it and there was no point asking about it, because Lord Grantham would be de facto landlord. That had shocked Milo, more than anything. These were people she trusted, and no one cared to tell her that the tenants that Matthew were recommended had come from another part of the Downton estate. Which meant, in effect, if she did not come to Downton before next Thursday, her house would be a part of the Downton estate. Hadn't Matthew known that? Milo had since contemplated that question several times. Your house? Tom Branson had shouted. Yours? And he had told her about the guardianship, which he felt he had been cheated out of. You never guess who I was talking to the other night, he had asked her, shaking his head, as if Milo knew, or even understood. Jack Prue. He shouted in her face. Jack Prue, the devil himself. And had done to her something so abhorrent, that when he got up, Milo did not want to move, even when she had heard the door click. And so he had gone back to Downton Abbey, where everyone else was. Where Milo was supposed to be. Even the servants were there, helping out. There had been no one else there. Where Milo had been stupid enough to leave after she was called out for her behavior. Even Thomas. She had never thought him capable of such cruel words. Once she had got out of the ruined dress, Milo had, with care and presence, gone up to the room Mrs. Crawley had offered to her, and in which she had stayed for nearly a week, and packed, leaving for Cambridge that night with everything she had brought with her. But, knowing now that the lease must be somewhere, and now with a bill of sale in her hand, which, to Milo, was an act of theft, Milo had, after walking the streets of Cambridge, decided to take the train to Downton and confront the very people whom she thought were, well, if not families, at least friends. Two allies, at least, were at Downton. They felt like they were the only two people in the world who understood her. Milo held back a sniff, as her skirt caught on the bramble. She plunged on, along a lane as darkness began to set in. Jack Prue. Milo held the memory of her dear friend in her mind. Like Thomas, he had always been protective. But it was more than that. He was the butler and footman at Enniscorthy for her grandmother. He had treasured her, protected her, doted on her. Made her feel clever for being herself. But now even the Jameson family, invited over by Lord Grantham, were refugees in their own land, and could not return now republicanism had begun for their country. It was the same with other families, and Mrs. Jameson could not afford to pay the tax levied to all of the aristocracy by the newly formed government. And their mercenaries that were the Republican army had taken the criminal damage to the great houses and families to a whole new level. Although it was different for Jackie. He could go back any time he liked. That thought cheered Milo as she put one weary foot in front of another. 88,888,888. Where in the world could she be? Cora Crawley said, next day, as questions, discreet at first, had circulated, until nearly everyone knew. I know I said a few choice words to her, Mary admitted. But, the way she behaved was outrageous, going through Matthew's things like that. And you have a monopoly on grief, I suppose, Edith told her sister. That young woman lost her brother, her father. And now, I hear, the Sparks have engaged a lawyer to fight for compulsory purchase. How would we feel if someone simply could buy Downton and push us out? It's not like she lives there, Tom Branson put in. She was renting to them, and the law is the law. The new ideas of the socialists, Violet Crawley put in. Taking a person's property away if a landlord is absentee. I know she is a strange person, but she is not unlikable. And I am sorry for her. Let's hope she can be found, Cora said, her lovely face frowning with concern. For a young woman to just disappear like, she stopped and broke off, looking to the door, as Margaret Jameson was shown in. Tall, statuesque, as Violet Crawley expected, she was taking her exile with stoicism and grace. Isabella and Helen should be on their way. They were in Ripon at the theatre. Prue has gone to get them. He engaged the chauffeur. She stopped and raised a hand as she sensed Mary was about to interrupt. Both will be told they are extremely fond of me, Lucina. She resembles their sister a great deal. And Mr. Barrow? Asked Edith, watching the cynicism pass over the faces of her so-called loved ones. Well, someone ought to think of him. He is her husband, after all. Mr. Barrow? Mary Crawley scoffed. He was there, agreeing with me, she told them. He was as outraged as I was that she had been through Matthew's papers. Cruel words, Edith told them. I know he can be cutting, nasty sometimes, but to Miss Ashby, he has known her all her life. He married her to keep her safe and helped to get her to Univer. Edith broke off as she saw Margaret Jameson raise an eyebrow of query. Mr. Carson has allowed him leave to travel to Cambridge, Lord Grantham told them, to see if there is anything that can be done. Cousin Isabella has been to the police, to discuss anything surrounding her stay at Crawley House. It was the least I could do but agree. What a sad, sorry business this all is, Cora Crawley told the family. But you know, I don't think things were altogether right with her here, when she left. I just wish we knew what had gone on, apart from Mary's outburst to Milo, Edith added, giving a sympathetic look to Mrs. Jameson. Tom Branson shifted in his chair. No, Cora Crawley finished. Something else. Then, perhaps if we ever find this lease she wanted, Edith persisted, that might tell us something.